Did Blowback cause 9/11? By the Southern Avenger. When Texas Congressman Ron Paul suggested in a Republican presidential debate that 9/11 was caused in part by blowback, a CIA term used to describe the negative consequences of mostly secretive foreign actions taken by the United States, former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani replied with the following quote, "That's really an extraordinary statement. I don't think I've heard that before, and I've heard some pretty absurd explanations for September 11th. And Giuliani isn't alone. There are millions of Americans, probably even a majority, who believe that 9/11 literally came out of the blue. That on September 10th, 2001, we were minding our own business, then on the next day, the United States was attacked for no reason. But the truth is, in the eyes of the rest of the world, we haven't been minding our own business for a very long time." As described in a 1987 PBS documentary, when the democratically elected Prime Minister of Iran decided to nationalize his country's oil supply in 1953, the CIA secretly orchestrated his overthrow and installed the Shah of Iran. Under the Shah, U.S. oil companies took over half of Iran's production. The Shah was also a ruthless dictator who, through his secret police, tortured and murdered thousands of his own people. These atrocities took place with the full support of the United States. Chanting death to the American Satan in 1979, the Iranian people overthrew the Shah, empowering a new dictator, the Ayatollah Khomeini. Most Americans of a certain age can remember well the Iranian hostage crisis of 1979, in which Iranians held dozens of U.S. citizens hostage for well over a year. What most probably did not realize was that the hostage crisis was provoked by decades of U.S. intervention. It was caused by blowback. During the ensuing Iran-Iraq war, the United States backed the president of Iraq, Saddam Hussein, as a bulwark against Iran. From 1983 to 1990, the U.S. government approved around $200 million in arms sales to Iraq. It was during this time that Hussein committed horrible atrocities against his own people with weapons we sold him. So between 1953 and 1983, between our support for Iran's Shah and Iraq's Hussein, America had sponsored two murderous dictators. Our relationship with Hussein changed in 1991 when Iraq invaded Kuwait. In a matter of months, the U.S. declared our former ally a world menace on par with Adolf Hitler or worse. After kicking Saddam out of Kuwait, the U.S. continued to bomb and impose economic sanctions on Iraq throughout the decade. Or as essayist Lew Rockwell writes, quote, "All during the 1990s, the U.S. attempted to starve the population of Iraq with the result of hundreds of thousands of deaths. Madeleine Albright said on national television that the deaths of 500,000 children, the United Nations number, was worth it in order to achieve our aims. Yes, that annoyed a few people." When Congressman Ron Paul suggested that American intervention overseas, or blowback, contributed to 9/11, Rudy Giuliani immediately proclaimed Paul a crazy man. But is the CIA crazy? The 9/11 Commission? Both cite blowback as a primary cause of 9/11. One need not be a foreign policy expert to understand this basic concept. Imagine if Mark Sanford had to ask Vladimir Putin every time South Carolina passed a new law. Imagine if Russia had thousands of troops stationed in Charleston. Imagine your own family starving, dying, and suffering because Putin had a beef with Mark Sanford. This has been the perceived relationship between millions of Muslims and the United States for a very long time. On this 6th anniversary of 9/11, Americans should finally be able to listen to a more sober assessment of what helped cause that awful day. To say that terrorists attacked us because they hate our freedom is an answer that could satisfy only a child or a Republican presidential contender. George W. Bush is the Johnny Cochran of American presidents. He was able to convince an American jury of his arguments simply because they really wanted to believe him. Overwhelming evidence to the contrary be damned. Avoiding another 9/11 is not merely a matter of tinkering with our current foreign policy, but a radical departure from it. It's time to bring our troops home. The chaos that exists in Iraq now will continue to exist once we leave. It might even get worse. But fighting the terrorists over there so that we don't have to fight them here is not sound foreign policy when such men come here precisely because we are over there. It's time to stop the vicious cycle. As over a half half century of America being over there should have taught us by now. For more, log into SouthernAvenger.com, read my weekly column in the Charleston City paper, or listen here each Tuesday and Friday to the Southern Avenger, only on 1250 WTMA.